Hey guys, welcome to the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. This is part 2. If you did not listen to part 1, we want you to stop right now, go back and listen to part 1 as we just jump back into this conversation that we've been having about sports and church and the tension and the dynamic between those two pieces. So as we jump back in, we had some conversations last time about the tensions that youth pastors are feeling with this, the tension that parents are feeling with this. We're going to talk a little bit about how some of the coaches might be experiencing this, how the teenagers, the kids themselves are experiencing this. And we're just going to keep talking in this conversation until we figure it all out for you. And then you're not going to have this problem ever again by the end
we will solve
of this podcast.
Oh,
for sure.
man.
So Ashley, as we jump back in, where are you at? What are some thoughts?
Where am I at? I was thinking a little bit more about the tension a youth pastor feels.
Yeah.
One that I can remember clearly as a youth pastor was most often you lose a volunteer because the kids aren't coming in their small group. And I think that is, just like Stuart, you said in the first episode, coaches don't hate church, and that's not why they choose to have a league. The same thing's true as like youth pastors don't necessarily hate athletics. It just happens to be they're trying to do what's best for the flock they've been entrusted with, which is the volunteers they've recruited and cast this vision that this is what the experience is going to be, and then that kid's not there. And to your point, Dan, as you were talking about like your kids, was that Stuart? Sorry. And to also both of your points, your small group leader either not reaching out to your kid or reaching out, which is a lot to do with training for the volunteers. But I think that's a tension youth pastors feel, in addition to the pressure to have numbers come to events or again, back to the volunteers. Why would I come to camp as a volunteer if 90% of my kids aren't going to be there because they're going to be at that, which is just part of a perspective. But I think some of the other tensions that we haven't mentioned yet are the tension the coach feels. I know for me, when I was a coach, my job as a coach is performance, right? It's to help teams play the best they can, win the most games, win the championship, help kids develop the skills to be the best that they can be, right? Because as a coach, if you're not performing, the parents aren't happy, the kids are going to go play on a different team, or you're going to get let go of your position, right? And I remember so many times, there was this rule we always had on our team was if you missed a practice, okay, for whatever reason it was, excused or unexcused, whatever, you had to sit the first half of a game, which was so frustrating when it was the best player on the team missing, right? Yeah. Because it's like, okay, well, they're gonna miss the first half of the game, and then someone else's kids are gonna get to play during that time, and then you have the parents who are complaining, like, well, that kid misses our games or misses a practice sometimes, but my kid never misses. Why isn't my kid getting more playing time? And so the coach is feeling this incredible pressure in order to create the best team. And like, I remember so many times when injuries get thrown into the mix and then you have kids not coming to practice, you don't even have enough kids to field a scrimmage. So it's like, or even field a team sometimes. So it's almost like we can't forget the pressure that the coaches put under by the parents, just like the pressure the youth pastors feeling from their leadership, just like the parents' pressure they're experiencing from other parents, or to help steward the gift that they see that's developing in their kid, right? And that's one of the conversations I've had with my dad is he's like, man, I saw that you were gifted in athletics, and I wanted to give you every opportunity you could to help develop that, and I'm so grateful for that. And I think another tension, before I talk about from the student athlete's point of view, is for parents, the pressure they feel. I don't know sometimes if parents understand the pressure they feel until they're through it in some ways. And I'm not going to say I know this from a parent's perspective as much as I watched my dad go through it. Yeah. And I watched all of my players and students go through it with their parents. But the pressure for a parent to be able to say, my kid plays on that team, or my kid, like vicariously I'm living through my kid, and so I think a lot of times parents are trying to work through their own stuff in the context of this conversation, honestly. And
parents taking credit for their kids' athletic ability as cosmic plagiarism.
That's true.
I like that.
Because we had nothing to do with how fast they could run, how tall they were, how athletic they were.
Genetics.
That's just God going here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. That is such a good point, Ashley. So good.
And for just a little on that parent, I mean, the coach puts those expectations on the kids. And like when that initial team meeting that we have, it's like the coach is there and he's like, we're going to be number 1 and number 2. We're going to move this team up to the next level. Like he has a goal. And then they're like, and if they don't show up, they're not going to play. And if they don't do this, then they're not going to do that. And then they need to be here and we're a team and like camaraderie and the whole thing. And you're like, yeah, I'll do anything, like, cause you feel the tension that he feels.
Yeah. And I remember,
because he invites you into the story.
Right. I remember my 8th grade year, our club travel premiere, whatever you call it in your region of the country. Our club coach calling a parent meeting with all of the players and the parents and saying, I don't want your kid to play high school soccer because I don't want them to get into bad habits. And I want to take this team around the world and we're going to compete at the national level. And I need everybody in, and I'm going to expose you to the top colleges and the top professional teams. And all of a sudden, my father, who is trying to, I mean, at the time I didn't realize it, but now that we've had conversations after all of this, we've been able to kind of understand each other more. But I remember him feeling this pressure of, I want Ashley to have the opportunities that I think she deserves and the things that she can step into. So how do I create those opportunities for her? Do I do this? Or does she play for her high school where, her community's been helping invest in her and cheer her on and she wants to play with her friends, and my dad's trying to navigate this tension of like, will Ashley really miss an opportunity to play college soccer if she doesn't do this? Will I feel responsible for that for the rest of my life because I didn't lead her well in this? And so I think that is another tension that parents are feeling is...
Okay, so you were the athlete.
Yes.
So what does that tension feel like for you? What did that feel like for you?
I didn't want to let my dad down.
Yeah.
I really wanted to do, like when you were talking about this is what Liam likes, I would have said the exact same thing because I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. Like, so to hear you say that, I'm like, yeah, I would have said the exact same thing. As an adult, I probably would say, I don't know what else I was good at. I don't know what else I had fun doing. Like, and if you read the latest studies, a lot of them are saying like more and more youth, middle and high school, less and less are participating because what's required of you when you do participate is so much higher at such a younger age. And so I think as a student athlete myself, I mean, I was never part of a youth group growing up because I was in a different state every single weekend of my life. I didn't have a small group. I didn't have a small group leader. And I would imagine a lot of like athletes are in that boat. I was never part of it. I didn't know what I was missing because my parents had never been part of that, right? I grew up in a family where we talked about God all the time, and I knew about God, but I didn't know him until I was 17. But I still didn't know what that meant to walk with him because I didn't have anybody in my life necessarily showing me that outside of my family. But I think what I was feeling in that moment was I don't know the right answer, but I'm 13, 14 years old at this time, so my parent must know best.
Sure.
So if my dad's saying no, when I remember one time, my freshman and sophomore year, I was so exhausted from playing. I was also doing Olympic development program, I was on the national pool team, so I'm traveling from Olympic center to Olympic center to Olympic center training and missing all of my high school life because I'm doing all this. And I remember going to my dad being like, I don't want to play in the Olympics, Dad. And him being like, no, but Ashley, you're in the top 40 in your age group in this whole country. You can do this. And I'd be like, so am I going to miss what I was supposed to do in my life because that's what my dad sees in me? It was so much like I didn't know myself well enough at that time. I love what you said, Stuart, about you've had your kids try all different kinds of things. Yeah. I really never did that. I found out what I was good at and I kept doing it and I was good at it. Not anymore, clearly. But I think, and I remember even being an athlete, like I remember hearing my dad brag about me to other parents. It was always about like how many points I scored or what team I made or what interview was in the paper that week or what scholarship I got from what different colleges. Yep. Like that was how I made him proud of me. And it was an identity struggle for me when that was so much a part of my life. So from an athlete's perspective, I didn't know how the youth pastor would feel, but I was just recently talking to a youth pastor, and we were talking about this very topic, and he said to me, I remember when I was in high school, I was on the leadership team of my youth group, and I was the captain of the swim team at school. And I would leave my swim practice 30 minutes early every single week to make it to youth group right on time. And my youth pastor came up to me and said, like you didn't come early because the leadership of the youth was supposed to come early. He's like, well, I leave swim practice 30 minutes early so I can get here on time to be at youth group. And he said to him, I wish that you love Jesus as much as you love swim practice. And I remember, like, when he's sharing that with me, which is so terrible, and I have chills saying it, like how much shame that casts on a kid, that a kid has to choose between what my parent wants from me, what my coach is asking me to do, what I want to actually do if I even know what that is, and then what my youth pastor, and I want to please all of them.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's so
absolutely.
good. You know, there's a flip side of this, and I want to say this, understanding I'm being as sensitive to, because it's obviously this is an emotional thing for you.
Yeah.
The flip side of it is if we're honest, and this is not to justify a position of athletics, we have kids who are musically talented, and so they've decided to throw themselves into a worship team on the church.
Right.
They serve every chance they get.
Absolutely.
They go on every mission trip.
Yeah.
They are on a leadership team.
It's true.
And they're doing it for the same exact reason that Ashley played soccer.
Yep.
So we have to be really careful. And here's what's interesting. I think we would all agree with this. The youth pastor would tend to say that kid loves Jesus more because they're doing it within the context of the church. But all of us in the same breath know that worship is life.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason why Ashley, in light of you trying to find yourself, there's no reason why it couldn't have maybe been different if it was like vision cast and somebody walking alongside her, and whether it was her parents, a youth leader, a coach to go, God did create you this way, and you've got a chance to make much of him by using this gift. Yeah. And it's just as important as a kid leading worship. That's what I think we have to get to.
I love that you brought up the leading worship thing, because I do have a daughter who's excels as a vocalist. She's so good, and she does serve at church every single Sunday. She was there. We came home from Thanksgiving early so she could serve, and sing. And we're, as parents, wanting to develop that as well. But we're saying, we don't want you to fall in that trap of, I'm the singer, I'm on stage, I get my identity from this. So we're bringing worship leaders in her world, like a coach, that are going to look at her holistically, not just because she has a voice and can sing, but because she has a spirit and she has this drive and this passion to lead these kids in worship.
Right. That's awesome.
But it's a dance.
It is.
You guys are so right, because I was talking to my counselor about this very thing. And it was interesting because I was asking her perspective on some of it. And she was saying every client that she's counseled for 20 plus years, even the ones who are at youth group every single week, they were at every single event, every single camp, versus the ones who missed everything because they were always at sports practice, whatever. The outcome was exactly the same. Like the feelings they have about them were the same, which is hilarious to me.
It is.
Because your identity gets wrapped up in it. It's like you feel guilty if you're not there. You don't know who you are without it. So that's why, when you were talking about having a balance of it, it is definitely what I'm supportive of. And I wish. Yeah,
because in episode 1, where you talked about, we've pitted these two things against each other, and there's a loser. And so for the kid who feels shamed, either he's then going to go to church and begrudgingly because he feels guilted into doing that, or he's going to say, well, you know what? Honestly, screw you. I'm going to go swim because they accept me for who I am.
Right.
And then we've lost them totally.
I would even propose, Kelly and I, and we're definitely trying to help Cameron and Chandler and Grant when he was playing football in high school and college think this way. That religion is Cameron sitting in church thinking about playing soccer. Authentic faith is Cameron playing soccer thinking about how she can glorify God. That's what we're after.
So good.
And I wish somebody would have come alongside me as a student athlete and helped me see bigger for how I could influence my team for that exact reason. Like, how could I be Jesus to my teammates? You know, instead of just like trying to get the most goals was the whole goal of my time being there. You know what I mean?
And a lot of times
I love
too,
that.
I would bet your dad felt this tension. And I know Dan, and this is not just parent speak. Part of the reason why with all three of our kids, but Cameron's still in the house, so I'll talk about her. Like, she has gradually elevated the competition she plays against.
Yeah.
It's easy to appear a lion tamer in a land where there are no lions. And it can get to where it's not hard and you're not, like, your character isn't growing because you score. Ashley could have stayed on a team where it was recreational and she scored 900 goals a game. But what allows a kid to grow in their character and their integrity is tension. And so part of the reason why Cameron went from rec to this club team, and then we moved her to this club team, and now she has done the, U.S. ODP and pool and all that stuff, and now she's playing on a DA team and going to play elite D1 soccer. But it's a character building thing. Things that if all we did was have her in church, it does not imply that a small group leader is important, because God knows Sam is a godsend to us. But Sam has understood what I love about Sam, and we can talk about this in just a second. What Sam did was, how can I help you guys win
Yep.
Yeah.
as a small group leader?
Yeah.
How can I help you win?
And that's all the parent wants.
yeah.
Because the parent, we're making it up as we go along. We really are.
Right.
And what we learned with the first kid, we then try to do differently with the second one. And, by the fourth, we've all given up anyway. But I don't mean that really. I don't mean that. But you do know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. We're just trying to get through this phase of life where we're at.
Right. And it is a phase.
Yeah.
In a
We
year,
say that all the time.
in a year, our daughter is out of our house.
Yeah.
And Kelly and I feel this immense responsibility that we launch her into culture as an influencer.
And we say all the time, authentic faith doesn't live on Sunday.
Right.
So at some point, they have to learn to live outside the walls of youth group. And sports is one of the best places for them to learn.
And that may be a great segue for us to talk about maybe some practical handles.
Yeah, so what does this look like? Let's start with the youth pastor. Let's start with the youth worker. If we're talking small group leaders, if we're talking paid staff, whatever. So what does this look like? So Stuart, I love what you're talking about with partnering with parents. It's such a buzzword in youth ministry culture.
Isn't it interesting? We talk about so much, but then when you ask who's doing it well,
yeah,
and it's like crickets.
Yeah.
So
It's so true.
Yeah.
So what is it? I almost feel like there's two different pieces to this. There's the practical piece of this. Okay, what does this look like?
Yeah.
How do we actually help parents own some responsibility? Because let's be honest, some of the parents can be as spiritually apathetic is probably too harsh of a word, but if you tried to sit down with parents and say, hey, would you come to this? I want to talk to how we can better equip you to be, a spiritual influence in your student's life. Like, some of them might not show up for that. So
maybe we should start here. Why not start assuming that every parent wants to be a great parent, instead of assuming that there are parents who are screwing their kids up?
Yeah.
Because even the parents who are unintentionally, maybe it isn't intentional.
Right.
None of my dad and mom, as clueless as we are, they were 10 billion times more clueless.
Yeah.
But they had incredible intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great place to start, is from a student pastor and small group leader perspective. Assume that mom and dad want to be great parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that assumption will lead you to ask, how can we help you win?
Yeah.
Just asking that question, because most parents, the only time they hear from anybody in authority is when something's going wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of, I see Ashley has she's that's what Sam did. Sam, it's obvious that Cameron is incredibly gifted. How can I help her win spiritually?
Yeah.
Because I also know, she said, that Cameron's heart is for Jesus. And so that was so big for us. And it kind of like released some tension.
Yeah.
That, okay, they're for me. They're for her.
Yeah. So practically, how can we start doing that? But the other side of that, with what you're saying, because I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who I've got 3 hours of programming every single week that I have to do. I've got parents that are saying, why aren't you taking our kids here or there? Like, I heard the youth group down the street, they do this once a week or once a month. Why don't we do something like that? I'm planning for this event that's going on. I've got this different thing that's going on. So essentially, you're giving me a totally separate job that I have to equip my leaders on how to do this. I have to do all these different things. So how do we begin to create a culture in our ministries where it doesn't exist, where this stuff over here that we're talking about becomes a priority and not just fulfilling programs,
so
not just making sure that there are adults there to make sure a program can happen and I've got content to talk about and those different things.
But you keep talking about programs and content when, the four of us around the table, relationships trump programs all day.
Yeah.
Right.
So the thing the youth pastor should absolutely be doing first is investing in the relationships. 3 hours of programming, what I don't even know what that would look like for a kid who doesn't play sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, much less.
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
So, but it exists. So
Sure.
in those situations, how do they begin to have conversations with their senior pastor? How do they begin at parent meetings to start talking about these kind of things, to begin to adjust that culture where the expectation isn't, okay, we have programs that hopefully you're going to bring your kids to, where we teach them how to be Christians, to moving to this kind of different level and understanding of what we're trying to do as a ministry.
Right.
good.
I wish somebody would have come alongside my dad, like a youth pastor. Nobody in my whole teenage years ever invited me to their youth group ever, which is hilarious to say that. But I wish, we live in an age where technology is at the tip of our fingertips. So if you are a youth pastor, record your ministry, your programming or whatever, put it into a podcast form, and then help parents know where to find it. Yeah. And then coach them what to do with it.
Absolutely. Because to that point, the only time I hear from our church on what they're talking about is when it's a sex series. That's literally the only time when it's like, hey, we're going to invite you into thing. Here's the thing and that is absolutely important. And that's what we should talk about. But we need to know about all the things that you're talking about.
Well, I'm thinking as a youth pastor, if you teach parents, hey, if you're going to be at a tournament this weekend, awesome. Here's how you guys can stay connected to what's going on in the church and with the students. Listen to a podcast together in the car. Talk about it. Here's the small group questions your small group would have talked about. Talk about his group. Maybe restructure your groups. If a bunch of kids are on a team together, put them all in a small group together so that they can go do life with their parents, with each other, on the road, and have somebody checking in back and forth with them.
Yeah, because statistics tell us that our committed students are there half the time. But in ministry world, because Sunday's coming, we're thinking about the 50% that are going to be there. And so some of that is just a mind shift for us. You got to prepare for the people that are going to show up.
But that's why you as a student pastor has to decentralize what you do.
Yeah.
Because you cannot do it all. You need to lean into your small group leaders to do that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Stuart, you got something cooking, man.
Well, first of all, I would suggest that we recalibrate how we define committed. Because just because a kid attends doesn't mean they're more spiritual, they're growing deeper.
Absolutely.
That's number one. Number two, I would like for us to get historical, because we had an incredible youth leader speak to our staff several months ago. And one of the things he talked about is that the history of youth ministry started when there were kids out there, and one very brave soul named Jim Rayburn decided to go to them, and an organization called Young Life was started. And the premise of Young Life was to go to students where they are.
Yep.
And there was a shift in the church. And the shift in the church was, we're going to take the Young Life model and we're going to adopt it for ourselves. And instead of us going and to them, it was come and hear.
Yeah.
We are talking a lot about come and hear.
Yep.
And the shift has to be back to what was original, and that is go to them, especially in an age of technology and the fact that the overwhelming data is screaming at us that by the middle of a 10th grade year, most of your kids are going to be gone anyway. And many times it's because they are involved in things. It's not just sports, it's drama. It's some of them have
Driver's
jobs.
license.
Some of them have jobs.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really important thing for us to consider. I was at a church in the Midwest a couple of weeks ago. This is not just a South thing. This is not a West Coast thing. I was in Middle America, and the pastor of this multi-campus church took me to dinner, and this topic came up. And in his mind, the best resource for him or for them, because they're in a travel ball, heavy place, was for him to somehow get his message that he's speaking to these families. And I think the part of our problem is that we think it's the information we're giving kids that is the change. And I could not agree with Dan more. It is about relationships. And part of the reason why I think our small group leaders don't feel they feel so much tension about relationships is that, and this is going to sting a little bit, but if we were to borrow from Chef's illustration about T-Rex wanting to hunt, we need more hunting guides and less concert promoters. Because our small group leaders tend to be promoting come to our deal more than teaching our kids how to be T-Rex in the wild, being Jesus with skin on. And so part of it is, let's reduce what we're doing programmatically so that we can be more effective relationally.
While equipping parents.
Yes.
To know how to talk to their kids about a certain topic.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of, you are a believer, and you do, know how to how to lead teenagers in a conversation. I would bet most parents have no idea.
Yeah.
In coaching them.
And along with that too comes this idea. I think we have to rethink how we measure success. There's no question. Instead of us counting how many come to our program, what if we start measuring how many students are in the wild hunting? I think youth pastors should own and embrace and champion the fact that you've got student athletes in your ministry that are a part of multiple. Somebody mentioned earlier that sport participation is declining. 2014, there were 14.7 high school students, and of them, almost 8 million, 14.7 million of them, 8 million were playing sports.
Yep.
That's 53% of your student body is playing sports, and it's higher in private schools. And don't forget that in those environments, the white student athlete is the minority. So if we want, think about what we're facing as a country. It's a optimal environment for us to launch influencers into culture.
It's good.
The other thing, relationally, we talk about like sticky fates and all that kind of stuff, and the 5 adults that are in a kid's life. The coach is one of those people.
Yeah.
So how is the youth pastor reaching out to the coaches and saying, "Hey, 5 of my students are on your team. How can I help you? What can we do?" And it's not how can I help you so you can get them to me. It's how can I help you where you're at with these kids, because I want to make sure that I'm looking out for their best. Right. And we need to just assume that, like as a parent, like there have been bad coaches and there have been good coaches. And when that coach is good, it's sometimes better than the small group leader.
Billy Graham said that a coach in 1 year will impact more kids than most people do in their lifetime.
Yeah.
Billy Graham said that. There's
So
God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, Mother Teresa, Billy Graham.
But it's kind of true. It's true, though.
I'm convinced in heaven when Dr. Graham passes away, which will be awful,
Yeah.
God's going to go, "Mother Teresa, what do you think we should do?" And she's going to go, "Billy, what do you think we should do?" And he's going to say, "We need to have crusades."
Stuart Hall,
This is the best.
You in the balcony, come, we'll wait.
That is a true statement, though, that he said.
No question.
Because I've seen Liam become a different person based on who is leading him that year. And he has a stellar coach this year. And the coach happens to love Jesus, right? And so that's helpful. But his drive, his passion, all those grit things, the soft skills that you want those kids to learn, they've been escalated because of that coach.
Right.
So why can't we lean into these coaches? Whether they're of faith or not, they are an influence in this child's life.
100%.
I mean, we youth pastors should be partnering with schools.
Yep.
You know, my kids go to this middle school over there, and I see a youth pastor who leads FCA every single week. And he is influential with the kids who may never show up.
Right.
But he's there, and he's a presence.
Yeah. I have a key to our high school. I can go on campus anytime, any day.
Yeah.
Because I volunteered as a coach when our daughters were young, and my first season I won 2 games. And the next year he said, "I want you to be a varsity coach." I'm like, that's all I had to do. And now I have a key to the school. But it's not because I'm this stellar coach. It's because I care about kids.
You showed up.
And this is the bigger part. Coaches are dying for help.
Yeah.
They want, and it's not let me help you coach, it's how can we serve you? At some point we thought when prayer was taken out of school that high school and middle school campus became off limits. It's off limits because we demand things instead of coming with an attitude of how
How can we help? Yeah.
I'd imagine a lot of youth pastors are sitting there thinking, I don't have any more time to offer anybody. Like, I can barely keep my head above water. How am I supposed to do all
But
this?
part of the reason why, and I'm sorry I'm banging this gong, is because we have begun to operate by come in here instead of let me go.
So
to
everything
there.
has to happen.
So
in
forward
space.
this conversation to your lead pastors and start the conversation
Well, I was
on
going
your
to say,
staff.
yeah. So here's the challenge that a lot of them might be feeling. The ones that are listening to this, they're feeling convicted. They're like, man, I think there's something to this.
Yeah.
If they're sitting there and they've got 2 programs a week they're responsible for, all these different things, a lot of them, they don't have the authority to make that decision, to change that. They've already got a 45, 50-hour work week that's already filled for them, that they might have an hour, or 2 to kind of to move around, but they're not the ones that can kind of, they can cast some vision and different things like that to senior pastors, to elders, to boards, different pieces like that. But how can we help them take a step towards actually being able to do this? For the ones that are sitting there and they're like, I want to start training my small group leaders to do this differently, but I'm already asking them to show up 3 hours a week. They got no extra time to volunteer to show up to anything
They're
else.
on their phones all day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's anything, it doesn't take a lot of time to text message a kid or to text message the parents.
Well, I think really if we're talking the lead small model, I mean, everything's pushed through the small group leader, which is what's hard because that's a volunteer who has limited time as well. And the really good small group leaders make time for it. And the other ones, they're average.
So okay, like that. Take advantage of technology.
Advantage of where kids already are.
Yep. What else? What are some other actual practical steps that they can write down and start to think about? Like how would you approach that conversation with the senior pastor if you're in that situation?
Maybe a scenario when the teenagers that are in our ministry now become adults and they become business leaders, doctors, and lawyers, and they love Jesus with all their heart, soul, and mind. Are you going to champion them in their occupation or vocation because of how they use their platform to make much of Jesus? And every pastor to a pastor is going to say, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the point is, why can we not do that with teenagers?
I think you're right. You said this earlier, is like the youth ministry environment. It's so controlled. And like, that's not the real world. It's a bubble that we want them to come live in the bubble. But when they're out on their sports.
It doesn't mean the bubble isn't important.
Right. Definitely.
But the bubble is, and part of this is philosophy as well. Does the bubble exist to inform, encourage, and enable? Or a lot of the time, a lot of youth pastors feel the tension because we've created the bubble to become a place where we share Christ with kids.
Yeah.
It's become an evangelism tool. And I'm implying that our students can share Christ with their teammates. Yeah. Our students can be examples to their coaches. Here's a heads up. the parents can be examples to the other parents on the sideline. It's the best place in the world.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, there was that one game. You know.
They can be the best example of asking for forgiveness and humility.
exactly. But again, see, even us, even though that is funny, but we're acting as if that always happens, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
That we could spend another 3 hours telling stories about relationships that we built,
Absolutely.
conversations that people that we interact with now on a daily basis because of athletics, and them asking us questions about our faith.
It's good.
Asking us to pray with that.
Exactly. Will you pray?
Or your kid is so nice.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Or what is happening in their life because we need some of that.
We had a kid on our team who hurt her knee. And when I texted the dad said, "I knew that you would text me."
Oh, I love that.
And I mean, I have an inroad with this dad who, by every appearance, doesn't think about God a lot.
Yeah.
But I certainly hope and pray that at some point I'm going to have a chance to have an incredible conversation with him.
Man. So there's still, I mean, we could sit around the circle and probably talk for another couple hours as long as we had some food to sustain us to do that. So I'm doubting this is the last podcast in the history of Rethinking Youth Ministry that's going to be touching on this topic in one form or another. So guys, thank you so much for sharing some experiences. And obviously, you know, I think everything that we do here, we're tied to, we're invested in, that we are, you know, that we can get excited and emotional, and that we really believe in. And so I'm grateful for the circle that we get to sit in week in and week out, and the kind of conversations that we get to have. And for you friends that are listening out there, we hope that you feel that. We hope that that this is really helpful for you. And as you're wrestling through and struggling with these tensions and doing your best to try to do some of these things we're talking about, and helping families and students take their faith outside of the walls, into their teams, into the band, into the performances, wherever it might be, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Mm-hmm. So on social media, on Facebook, wherever, we'd love to hear questions you have about this podcast, ways that you feel like that you've done this well, ways that you feel like you have failed miserably at this.
Please email me. I would love people to email me.
What's your email?
Me too.
shall@rethinkgroup.org.
All right. And that's actually every single one of us.
Yeah.
So you can, Dan Scott, D Scott at Rethink, Ashley Bohince, A Bohince, Bohinc, no E.
Bohinky.
And then that got weird, but I'm going to keep moving on. Brett Talley, B Talley at Rethink Group, or find us on social media. We would love to hear those pieces too. So thank you guys for jumping in on this discussion, and thank you guys for joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. We really hope that you've enjoyed these two podcasts, these two parts, and we would love for you to subscribe on the Apple Podcast app so that you don't miss out on anything else that we do. And while you're there, we would love for you to leave a review. Let us know how we're doing, what we can do to make this podcast better. And please share this podcast. I'm sure there were some other people that came to mind while you're listening to this that would be helpful for them to understand somebody else's perspective, or just to have some new thoughts and ideas on the topic. And finally, for more great resources, we want you to check out the show notes for this episode, and to learn more about the student curriculum and strategy that we're all a part of here at Orange. We want you to visit our website, rethinkingrym.org. So until next time, I'm Brett.
I'm Ashley.
I'm Dan.
I'm Stuart.
And thank you so much for joining us.